The Invisible Disabilities Association proudly presents The Invisible No More Show, the podcast that highlights new technologies and conversations that matter for people living with invisible disabilities. Join us as we talk with inspirational speaker John O'Leary.
So looking back at your own life, have you ever done anything that you now realize was a huge mistake? And if you are even remotely normal, the answer is yes. When I was 9 years old, I took a piece of cardboard, walked into my mom and dad's garage, held it over a can of gasoline, and the plan was to pour a little bit of gasoline, safe amount of course, on top of a burning piece of paper. Before the liquid even came out, the fumes grabbed that flame, pulled it back in, created a massive explosion, and launched me 20 feet against the far side of the garage, set my world on fire, and changed me forever. And I remember being in the emergency room later that morning on my back, no clothes on, no skin on, laying in the hospital bed with one thought. And for me, the thought was, oh my gosh, my dad is going to freaking kill me when he finds out. My father's going to kill me. He'll be furious. And then I hear his voice down the hall. He's speaking to a nurse, and the question my dad asked was, "Where's my boy John? Where's my boy John?" And I remember being that little boy, hearing the roar of the line down the hall, thinking, oh my gosh, the old man has come to finish me off. Like, this thing is over. This nurse does me no favor. She brings my father back into the room. He pulls back the curtain. He marches in, shoulders back, walks over to me, points down, and then says words I'll never forget. "John, look at me when I'm talking to you." So there's the kiss of death. And then he goes on to say, "I have never been so proud of anybody in my entire life. And my little buddy today, this morning, I am just proud to be your dad." And then my father says, "I love you. And I love you. I love you." And as he kept saying, "I love you," I remember eventually crossing my arms and shutting my eyes thinking, oh my gosh, nobody told my dad what happened. Like, he clearly does not know. I just blew up the house. And yet what I think my father was showing me that day is he knew exactly what happened. He also knew about the power of faith, the power of forgiveness, the power of love, and the power of grace to change someone else's life. And in practicing all of this, he was beginning to change my life. It did not make that day in the emergency room easy. It did not make 5 months in burn care easy. It did not make losing fingers to amputation easy, or 3+ decades that have fallen with some outward scars and also some invisible ones easy. I just think that love and forgiveness and grace he showed made the journey possible. And it changed what happens next. It changed my heart into one that could accept help from others. And help was required when you're going through a difficult time. I certainly needed it myself as a kid. I need it today still as a man. But back then I needed volunteers. I needed blood. I needed healthcare professionals. I needed prayers. We needed money. We needed a house to stay. I needed 24-hour care to guide me through those 5 months. I needed experts in therapy to help me figure out how to hold things with my hands again. I needed all this love, and I was fortunate and humble enough to accept it. I think one of the hardest things for us to do when we recover or move forward in life is the decision to open our minds, our eyes, and our hearts wide enough to accept help. And I have been on this journey since age 9 of gratefully saying yes when people offer to extend a hand. It changed what happened during 5 months in hospital. It changed what happens over a couple years of recovery. It changed what happens as I eventually went back to school, as I eventually found out who I was and whose I was and what I was going to do in my life. And then it changed what happened professionally. After 20 years of recovery, I eventually decided I wanted to tell people my story. The very first group I ever spoke to was not some large theater. It wasn't some huge conference center. It wasn't executives or salespeople. My very first group ever was 3 Girl Scouts in St. Louis County in the 3rd grade. And I was so nervous before I spoke to them that I actually got sick in the parking lot. So there's my courage, there's my strength. But I remember after getting sick in the parking lot, I grabbed my bag, reached for a piece of gum, put it in my mouth, walked away from the car, and walked into the school building. Because I had remembered as a young boy people showing up in my life and the impact that it made on me. And it was my hope that day, in some small way, I might make a difference for some little 3rd grader Girl Scout Well, the cool thing is one of those girls had a father who was a Rotarian who invited me to speak. And then the cool thing there is one of the members there was also in Kiwanis, and then he invited me to speak. And then one of those guys ran a small business. And over the last 14 years of saying yes, one by one, first with 3 third graders, then to one smaller volunteer organization, we have had the opportunity now of saying yes to more than 2 million people at live speaking events. Have a couple books out there that have traveled around the world. One of them is called On Fire. It's been translated into 16 languages. Another one is called In Awe. It's just been published. We're blessed. We're fortunate. We recognize how much we have to be grateful for, but I think primarily the reason we have that is because of a father's love. A decision that my dad made 32 years ago when he was scared out of his mind, walking to his dying son with no skin on, instead of judging and showing up with anger or fear to show up in love. It changed my life. And I'm utterly convinced that that same decision to show up in your day and into the days of those that you serve and love will change not only their lives, but also yours. I'm John O'Leary, and that's my story.